This video was digitized from a photograph collection I received from John W. Charlesworth Jr., and he was a musician in the United States Navy. And he entered the Navy in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania on the 17th of September 1935 and immediately shipped off to Navy boot camp in Norfolk, Virginia. He then served at the Naval School of Music in Washington, D.C. from 1936 to 1937. Then in 1937 he sailed on the USS Vincennes CA-44 on her shakedown cruise to Europe. And then upon returning from that cruise, he was assigned to the USS Indianapolis CA-35, where he remained until his discharge in 1941, just before World War II. So let's get underway in this photo collection. And immediately upon joining the Navy on the 17th of September in Philadelphia, John Charlesworth traveled to Baltimore and caught this vessel, the City of Norfolk, and it was part of the Chesapeake lines. And he traveled from Baltimore to Norfolk on the 17th and 18th of September, and arriving at the U.S. Naval Norfolk Training Station. And then once there, he was assigned to Platoon 45, and he says this is them passing in review in front of the reviewing stand, dress parade. He says his platoon was right behind the colors there. He said we got our first star that day. And this is them preparing for Saturday morning bag inspection, and that was in their barracks. And he said this is their living conditions. They had hammocks. They didn't have racks, they had hammocks. And he said this is their barracks. And just a great view of Norfolk Training Center here in 1935. And this is looking down Main Street at the Training Center Norfolk. And see there's like a mock-up ship there to the left, and then there's the real ships all the way back in the background. And he said this is the hostess house and library. And not too sure what all was going on at the hostess house, but he said this was one of the hostesses. So interesting. I don't know if this was on the base or off the base. And he said this was their ballroom, which would have been pretty popular in 1935, where they would have had, dancing and so forth, live music. And he says this is a church service. And he said full of platoons on a Sunday. And this is them out in the lagoon practicing their rowing. And then one of his shipmates there in boot camp, Byron Peppers, must have been assigned to this ship, the USS Wyoming, because he said this is Byron Peppers' ship in 1935. And then after completing boot camp, John Charlesworth is assigned to Washington, D.C. and the Navy's School of Music. And that's him on the left there. So we actually get to see John Charlesworth. And then in the middle is R.J. Mays, and on the right is W. Melhart. And looks like John Charlesworth was a singer. And then this next picture coming up was titled Our Gang. And I'm not too sure if he played any other instruments, but he was definitely a singer. And then this next photo is of Dutch Van de Morton. And his real name was Paul B. Dutch Van de Morton. And I actually found him in doing some research. And he was still in the Navy in 1942. He was at the sub base there at Pearl Harbor, and he was a musician first class. So I don't know how long he actually stayed in the Navy, but he was still in 1942. And he had joined the same time that John Charlesworth did on the 17th of September 1935, and he was from Buffalo, New York. And then this last picture here from the Navy School of Music is of Charles Haslip, and it said that he was that was inside the School of Music living quarters. And upon completing the Navy School of Music in 1937, John Charlesworth is assigned to the USS Vincennes CA-44, and she was a New Orleans class cruiser, and he caught up with her in Boston as she was getting ready to sail on her first cruise, her shakedown cruise to Europe, and visiting Stockholm, Sweden, Helsinki, Finland, Le Havre, France, and Portsmouth, England. And this picture of Vincennes is actually when she was making her port call in Le Havre, France. And you could see this this next picture coming up here is he took of Boston Harbor, and you can faintly make out some of the ships there in the background to the right. And then this picture he has noted as being at the Bunker Hill Monument, and that's Blackie and Dago, he said, before they set sail on this cruise. And on their first stop in Stockholm, Sweden, this picture is of a party given by Ambassador Lawrence Steinhardt at Hasselbacken in Stockholm, Sweden, and he said the music was furnished by us. And so, as you can see, that's why these ships carried their own bands and orchestras, I guess, for functions like this. And then this next one is of a couple of his shipmates, Ferreira, Siebert, John, and Smith. And then this next one is of them in front of Otto Kruger's estate. And I'm not too sure, there was a famous actor during this time frame named Otto Kruger. I'm not too sure if that's his place or not. That looks pretty palatial. And then this next picture is just of a Swedish sailor. And this next one is of a Swedish military sentry at the palace. And this one says May 1937, and it's of E.A. Powell. And he stopped in a chat with two students in one of Stockholm's small parks. And then this next one's also in May of 1937, and it's W.K. Roth and E.A. Powell with some Swedish sailors. And here's another one of E.A. Powell. He says his nickname was Pappy, and he says he's helping a policeman walk his beat. And there must have been a big function or big parade or celebration here in Stockholm for this visit, because these next pictures are of that function, and looks like the sailors from the Vincennes and probably the other ships that were in that battle group that made that deployment with them are in review, and then also Swedish, and it says, and Finnish troops in review. And these next pictures are when they made their port call to Le Havre, France. And this once again is Vincennes in Le Havre. And then this next one is of a Liberty party going on Liberty in France. And then this last one is a picture of a delegation from the chateau or town of Vincennes there in France, making a visit to the ship with its same name, although Vincennes was actually named for the city of Vincennes in Indiana in the United States. But and that concludes the Vincennes photos. He didn't have any pictures of the last port call visit in Portsmouth, England. And just a little side note on Vincennes, this is in 1937. She would go on to be sunk in 1942 at the Battle of Savo Island. So she had a short career. Like I said, she was commissioned in February 1937, and then sunk in 1942, August of 1942. So a short career for a great ship. And then after completing his cruise on Vincennes in late 1937, John Charlesworth was transferred to the USS Indianapolis CA-35, and she was a Portland-class heavy cruiser commissioned on the 15th of November 1932. And this aerial photograph you're looking at is of Indianapolis in January of 1938 while in San Diego. And then this next picture is of the band aboard Indianapolis. And this next picture is of Captain Edward Hansen, and this was sometime in 1941 at his change of command ceremony. And I don't have an exact date, but he took command in 1941, and then he left in July of 1942. So John Charlesworth had left in 1941, so this was probably right before his departure. And you can see this next picture is of the change of command ceremony there on board Indianapolis in 1941. And John Charlesworth would stay on Indianapolis until 1941, and then he would leave as a musician first class, and then finish up his 6 years in the Navy. And it was just really nice getting this photo collection that started with him joining in 1935 and then finishing up in 1941, just before World War II. And like Vincennes, Indianapolis would have a tragic end and a short-lived career in the Navy. In July of 1945, Indianapolis was completing a top-secret high-speed trip to deliver uranium and other components to build the Little Boy bomb, which was the first nuclear weapon ever used in combat. And she was delivering those to the Tinian Naval Base. And then after doing that, she departed for the Philippines on training. And then while she was heading there on the 30th of July, she was torpedoed by a Japanese submarine, and she sank within 12 minutes of being torpedoed. Of the 1,195 crewmen aboard, approximately 300 went down with the ship, and the remaining 890 faced exposure, dehydration, and shark attacks. And it really wasn't, concerning that there wasn't any radio transmission from Indianapolis for 4 days because of the nature of the mission she was on. It was top secret, and it wasn't until 4 days later, after the torpedoing, that she was spotted by a U.S. Navy plane, and rescue efforts were put into place. And of the 1,195 crewmen on Indianapolis, only 316 survived the torpedoing and being adrift for over 4 days. And just like Vincennes, a tragic end. And it's just interesting that John Charlesworth served on both of those ships prior to World War II. And just a great photo collection, and I hope you enjoyed.